So, I was going to talk to y'all just a little, very briefly about some of the film technology or terminology that's used in this. You can look back to whenever he's on the subway, and they use different lighting there. They use low-key lighting while they're on the subway. So that's basically whenever it's kind of dark all around them, and that just intensifies things. Now it goes back to the lighting. Okay, well, it goes back to the lighting being neutral lighting whenever they have the scenes with Tom Hanks and them, his dad. And that basically creates a setting for them that's a lot more kind of like joyful memories. Okay, and then also they obviously use flashback. So that's kind of the main technique that's used here. They flash back in between the conversation that's going on in the train and then going back to the scene with his dad. And lastly, the one that I thought was the most interesting is actually how they use the camera while they're on the subway. It's kind of like an intense moment for them. I mean, obviously he's got the little like gas mask on his head, and so it's very intense for him. And they have added in a slight tilt to the camera. And so I wanted to show you, but it wasn't pulling quite up. When they're on the subway, then you're sitting there watching them, and everything's kind of tilting around as if they actually were on the subway. So I thought that was just helped intensify the scene of what was happening.
So I'm going to read an excerpt from the actual text. In this excerpt, Oscar is talking about his father's death, and he's a very creative child, and so you'll see that when I read this to you. I felt in the space between the bed and the wall and found things that happened to me. It was completely full. I was going to have to start a new volume soon. I read that it was the paper that kept the towers burning, all of those notepads and Xeroxes, and printed emails and photographs of kids, and books and dollar bills and wallets and documents and files. All of them were fuel. Maybe if we lived in a paperless society, which lots of scientists say we'll live in one day soon, Dad would still be alive. Maybe I shouldn't start a new volume. I grabbed the flashlight from my backpack and aimed it at the book. I saw maps and drawings, pictures from magazines and newspapers and the internet, pictures I'd taken with Grandpa's camera. The whole world was in there. Finally, I found the pictures of the falling body. Was it Dad? Maybe. Whoever it was somebody. I ripped the pages out of the book. I reversed the order so the last one was first and the first was last. When I flipped through them, it looked like the man was floating up through the sky. And if I'd had more pictures, he would have flown through a window back into the building, and the smoke would have poured into the hole that the plane was about to come out of. Dad would have left his messages backwards until the machine was empty, and the plane would have flown backward away from him, all the way to Boston. He would have taken the elevator to the street and pressed a button for the top floor. He would walk backward to the subway, and the subway would have gone backward through the tunnel back to our stop. Dad would have gone backward through the turnstile, then swiped his Metro card backward, then walked home backward as he read the New York Times from right to left. He would have spit coffee into his mug, unbrushed his teeth, and put hair on his face with his razor. He would have gotten back into bed. The alarm would have run backward. He would have dreamt backward. Then he would have gotten up again at the end of the night before the worst day. He would have walked backward to my room, whistling, "I Am the Walrus," backward. He would have gotten into bed with me. He would have looked at the stars in my ceiling, which would have pulled back their light from our eyes. I'd have said, "Nothing," backward. He'd have said, "Yeah, buddy," backward. I'd have said, "Dad," backward, which would have sounded the same as Dad forward. He would have told me the story of the sixth borough, from the voice in the can at the end to the beginning, from "I love you" to "once upon a time." We would have been safe. And so the great thing about this book that I loved, one of the reasons why we chose it, was for all the visual literacy that's incorporated in it. And so I want to show you this. You don't have to look if you don't want, but it's basically what he's talking about. It's reversing the order, the bodies flying back into the building.
But as we said, he's reversed it, so it's more peaceful for him to think about them going backwards, back into it.
And it's this idea that he's had throughout the whole book that if he could just invent something, invent a solution, everything would be okay.
So I was gonna turn the lights back on after this, but I kind of like that it's, you know, it kind of makes us feel more comfortable with them off. Okay.
So, speaking of the visual literacy, that's a great component of this book. I mentioned in the reading, the book that he was creating, Things That Happened to Me. And in here, Oscar not only keeps a scrapbook of the things that have happened to him in this year, just some various pictures, but there's also really cool, he's got business cards, and his dad and he used to play this game, circling in the newspaper for clues. And so they show you all that in there. And I think this is a great tool for kids because it shows that not only is technology advancing, but there are new ways to recreate literature. And so, you know, as you're a kid and flipping through a book and you see a picture, how exciting that is. But what about when you see a blank page? What does that blank page mean? And so it's just some great skills that you can build on with your students through the reading of this novel, visual literacy.
Going off of that, Melissa and I wanted to talk to you about the approach that we had with this book. We actually flip-flopped what we're going to do. Melissa read the book first and watched the movie second, and I actually watched the movie first and read the book second, so that we could see the opposing views of it. There were several important things to point out that she showed you in the book that didn't come up in the movie. So for me, I was sitting there watching the movie thinking these are great details, like I'm getting so attached to these characters. There's a whole, I won't give it away, but there's a whole plot with the grandfather that I had one idea about. But since she'd read the book first, she had a completely different perspective. She didn't think it was as detailed. She didn't think that the characters were developed as well as I did. So we really loved doing that.
It was very frustrating for me as somebody who read the book first to go and watch the movie. So if any of you have seen the movie, I strongly urge you to pick up this book because it is phenomenal. And the movie just does not do it justice. We've handed out a sheet of paper. So as you know, part of the requirements for this project were that we handed out a sheet of paper with a summary and the details of the book. And we decided that since this was such a controversial book, we would do a mock Dear Parent letter, proposing the information that's in the book and asking parents if you have any questions or concerns, you're more than welcome to come and sit down and speak with us about those.
And so you can see at the end of the letter, we've added in, we've posted a link on our webpage so that you can go and watch the video clip yourself, so that the parents know what's going on in the classroom. We've asked them to not share it with the students until after we've gone over the lesson, just so that we can get that, we can really cultivate those experiences with the students. So we really think that using the video in classrooms is really helpful for students, not only to create an emotional connection, but maybe, like we were saying, pull out different aspects from clips that aren't in books or from movies or vice versa. But that's pretty much it. Do we have any questions about anything? Yeah.
Is